Today I saw a video of a banana tree being sliced open and some crabs came out of it. Like full-blown big ocean crabs. They kind of like put their hand in and pulled these crabs out of this banana plant. And I thought, how could that be? Is this real? And I looked at the comments, and the comments were pretty much asking the same thing. Wow, that's crazy. How could this be? Half the people are saying, oh yeah, this is AI, or this came up before, or that's not the way that it is, or there are no crabs living in banana trees. All sorts of wacky stuff. This is Earth Tones, episode 41. We are all misunderstood. These days, it is hard to know what is real. And you're talking to somebody who thinks that they have sources that are legitimate, and you think that sounds wrong, and you're probably right, but they think they're right, and AI is lying to your face straight up, just saying this is true, and then you say, no, it's not, I actually know about this, and it says, oh yeah, you're right, sorry. We're living at such a crazy time, and it's made me think this week about how often we are misunderstood. And I think we're misunderstood probably most of the time. It's like the things that we're sharing with each other are just approximations. I saw a great movie this week, the Project Hail Mary with Ryan Gosling. So good. Scarlett and I went. We really enjoyed it. And it gave me a lot to think about in terms of communication, because Ryan Gosling's main character, Grace, and this alien, I guess you could call him, Rocky, they are communicating once they figure out how, but there's a lot of things that are difficult to share with one another, and they can't fully, of course, know each other's experiences. Great movie, highly recommend it. This is Earth Tones, episode 41. We're all misunderstood. So yeah, that's what we're going to talk about, but first, a sound from our beautiful Earth.
Approaching Massachusetts Avenue. Doors will open on the left. Change here for bus connections.
Did that stress you out? That is the Orange Line stopping at Mass Ave. Of course, our famous MBTA, the oldest subway in America. I think that's its claim to fame. And it does seem often like, well, everybody else probably improved upon this design after ours. So, for a bit of old news, this is Tape Op from August-September 2024. So not super old news, I guess. A couple of years old. And so Steve Evetts produced a bunch of records that I was surprised to learn more about. I do not know Steve Evetts, or did not until this article, and he made some amazing albums within the alternative and hardcore heavy metal, I guess you could call it, type of scene. But really interesting how much of his background was rooted in traditional analog recording. And he started in 92, and of course back then things were to tape, and he talks in this article within Tape Op about that transition. But I pulled out a quote. The question to him was, essentially they're talking about like updating the sounds of records, and how do you make a modern record with all of its like heavy hitting drums. And so he had said, if I go too far in the analog direction, I'll be accused of sounding too retro. And then the Tape Op interviewer said, unless you add some sub-bass hits to the downbeats. And so this was his response. He said, those kind of production tricks with sub-hits and all that can have an impact, but to me, they're to distract us from the fact that the performance isn't totally there. I would rather capture that excitement of when everybody pushes together and hits on a downbeat or a chorus. If you think about AC/DC, why does it sound huge? If you put those tracks in Pro Tools, the bass and drums are not on top of each other. It sounds huge because of the way it fits, of the way that it hits together. I've used them before, but don't rely on those tricks to generate excitement in your production. Yeah, that's really interesting to me. I remember talking to Andy Basford, the reggae session player, about syncing playing guitar and keyboard in reggae. And he was saying if you perfectly line them up, they actually lose their impact and they don't sound as thick. You want to have there be slight variation. The keyboard may be slightly ahead of the guitar, so you're playing just behind it, or maybe vice versa. But the idea that you're both playing in time, but they're not metronomically quantized to be dead on top of each other. That little gradient is how that feel happens, and especially if it's consistent, so that the guitar is ever so slightly behind the keyboard, but not just sometimes, it's how each person is feeling it. And so that bigness is coming from it almost being like a flam, but it's happening so quickly that it just sounds like one big note. I think that's really interesting. And if you were to look at how a guitar chord sounds, or how, a drummer hits maybe the kick and snare together, they're not going to be time aligned perfect. They're going to be vaguely perfect. They're going to be in the right place, but they're going to have a distinctly different sonic signature and how they take up space. So yeah, we're all misunderstood. That's what we're talking about today on Earth Tones, episode 41. I think communication is something we have to prioritize, and it's something that is tricky. A lot of the time we could benefit from getting a little better at communication and being realistic about the fact that no one probably can totally understand where you're coming from, and do we even understand ourselves? Here it is, episode 41. We're all misunderstood. How many people do you think really get you? If you think about everyone in your life, how many understand your creative vision, your taste, your motivations? We spend so much time worrying about what other people think about us, but are any of them an authority you trust? Do you admire their taste? Do they see what you're going for? People are constantly sharing hot takes. There's layers of masks and personas and shadows and trauma and projections, and the list goes on and on. And of course, we're doing it ourselves too. It's not just other people. How well do you understand yourself? Do you know what you're trying to do? Are you sure? Try to write it down and articulate exactly what you're going for, then share it with somebody. Chaos ensues. It's funny, we often are trying to get our points across, but there's no way to know if the other person really understands where you're coming from. And that is clear when we have a misunderstanding, because we have some sort of confrontation and then we have to resolve it. But think about all the times that we're kind of just tacitly agreeing and we're just going about our conversation, and how much of it's missing the mark. How much of it is that we're actually taking away something from a conversation that we think we're agreeing with somebody and we don't even really know. Oh boy, it will boggle the mind. And so it ends up being like, all right, well, what are you going to do? You're just going to kind of proceed and accept that all of this is kind of an approximation. So when it comes to our creativity, well, how can we reconcile the fact that, we can't hear music from someone else's perspective? At some point, we have to make it in the way that we think sounds cool to us, and then that's the way that it goes. If other people hear it completely differently, we'll never know how they hear it. And so we have to kind of figure out how to reconcile those things and make it the way that we think works for us anyways. All right, for a musical demonstration this week. This is a C C minor groove. And what I was thinking about was, imagine we go. There's a reggae and a bossa nova. Which one is it? So even within a groove, we might hear different elements of something that's familiar to us. This is leaning into the reggae. Same chords. Maybe that's leaning into the bossa nova. But if I'm just playing, maybe it ends up being a combination of the two. Where's the line between reggae and bossa nova in that case? Who knows? Does it really matter? It probably doesn't. But what does matter is that we play something that feels like it's a groove that we feel inside and are in sync with. I think that's the power of music, is that we can do and say things that don't need to be boiled down into some specific idea. It just is felt and comes across. Speaking of something that feels amazing and comes across so strong, what is on the turntable this week? Man from Waurika. What an album. One of my absolute favorites, Rico Rodriguez. I had bought this album for my friend David Wesson when I was down in New Orleans, and that was an import copy. I think it was even kind of a bootleg copy, and it sounded really good. And I had thought, man, maybe I should have bought 2 copies, but of course they didn't have to. If you find this record at all, you're in luck. And I bought it in Portland, Maine last week. I was very lucky to find it available in a cool record shop in Portland. And this is an original press. This was a reggae album. It's the only reggae album that was ever put out on Blue Note, the legendary jazz record label. It is incredible. Man from Waurika by Rico Rodriguez. We play some of those songs with the Attractors. It's fantastic. It was reissued in the 90s as something else. I forget the name of what it was reissued as. But yeah, Man from Waurika, absolutely extraordinary. You can find it on YouTube. I think most of the tracks are on Spotify under a different title. But yeah, that's incredible. It is essentially a refined Jamaican jazz ska type of thing, where it comes from the mid-70s, but it has kind of this Count Ossie early music, but in a very refined way. And when you listen to it, I think you'll know what I'm talking about. Something that helped me this week, diving in and creating based on instinct, firing up Big Blue. This week I was thinking about, man, I'd like to be just doing some dub, making some dub, having some fun. And I just said, all right, I'm going to get to the studio a little early. I'm going to fire up the console, which has mostly been collecting dust for a few months. And I'm just going to plug in a bunch of random effects. I'm just going to try to go based on instinct and go as fast as I can. Plug in, a space echo and some reverb or whatever I can get my phase going. And what I did was, just by trying to go quickly, I had a lot of fun because I went on YouTube and I essentially just pirated a copy, like a download MP3 of a Steel Pulse song. And I was able to use the stem splitter and Logic to create tracks. Like I had drums and bass, and put them up on the console and have fun just making a remix for fun, just making some dub. And I sent it to Mike and Thad, and they thought it was cool. So yeah, just going based on instinct, being willing to make things quickly and doing it just for fun. I think in the past maybe I would have gotten bogged down with like, well, let's get some royalty-free multi-tracks or something. It's like, nah, man, it's just for my own enjoyment. It's I know I can't put that dub out legally on Spotify or something because, of course, it's not something I have clearance from Steel Pulse to do, but it's something I can do for fun. And so I enjoyed the creative aspect of doing that. So yeah, not getting stuck thinking about too much, just thinking about how you can have some fun making some music. All right, friends, that is episode 41 of Earth Tones. I am Jake Pardee, your host. You can visit jakepardee.com for more information about my music and maritimerecording.com for more information about your music. Today I had a great meeting with someone talking about an album that we're going to start working on in a few weeks, and I'm excited. So please come on by and let's talk about doing some more music. I hope to line up a bunch more projects for this year. I'm Jake Pardee signing off. Always here to remind you we are a beautifully musical species on a fantastically musical planet, and I will see you next time for Earth Tones episode 42.